our show got taken to I don't even know what the real word is, but a lot of
it was out of context. It was out of
very
context.
much out of context. So let's break down their spring game, because what we said was we were talking about Damian Martinez if he went to Miami, and we got talking about DJU, and because they played with one another. Joe, I feel more validated about a quarterback than I've ever felt validated, because I said, listen, Damian Martinez last year was a big reason why Oregon State had to get them out of a lot of holes that they were in. Joe, we talked about that during the entire season, right? About how Damian Martinez was picking up first downs on 3rd and 7 to keep them alive. Joe, the biggest thing for me taken out of that, I thought their defensive line was really good. I thought their front seven played really fast. I thought their secondary was good. But I got to focus on DJU and the inefficiency that he had. What says you?
So before we kind of dig in on the offensive concerns, the defensive line to me is unbelievable. And it's crazy to look at how good that they were last year. And then I can project and feel maybe that they could be better this upcoming year. They lived and died on how good their defensive line was. And I love that Marvin Jones Jr. got the opportunity to remove himself from the shadow of just having to be on a very deep defensive line. And he looked amazing, man. Like I think
did
he is somebody that I think really deserves to get credit for how good he could be in 2024. If we're going to be hyperbolic, I think that that's a fair one, because he really cooked. Their run game, there were a ton of running backs, man, that just like, I can't even sit here and name all of them. It felt like every other big splash play offensively was a different running back, whether it was the first one or the fourth one that was getting a big play. So I think the running back room looked pretty strong. They are going to be, as we said, one of the top 2 teams in the ACC. No lower, no higher. But they're going to live and die on how good DJU is. DJU can't play like that if they expect to win the ACC again. Their roster is good enough to carry them, just like Oregon State did last year. And this roster is much better than that Oregon State roster. But for Christ's sake, be honest with yourself, Florida State fans. He looked rough. And I'm trying to not be super negative about this, but he did the same thing that I have criticized him for as a draft prospect, game in and game out, forcing the ball to covered guys and just letting the ball get knocked away or leading to turnovers. They got to figure something out. And I don't think it's swapping him out, but they got to have a different offensive identity. They can't throw the ball as much as they did last year.
I 100% agree with that statement. Joey went 12 of 26 for 177 yards and no touchdowns, no interceptions. But he also had an interception dropped. The completions were relatively simple, right? Like, I mean, a lot of passes that were those little pop passes. I mean, he had an off day. Now, the only thing that I will give him, because I give every quarterback this same type of not excuse, but understanding. It's the first real, true, in-person live action that you have outside of practice with a brand new team. I want to give him – I give every quarterback the benefit of the doubt. But, Joe, he's still below 50%, right? And I still think that it is a problem. They're trying to work in new receivers. I think, their offensive line did not look that great. And you talked about how dominant that defensive line was. Mm-hmm. Joe, they had a pair of sacks in the opening drive. The front seven had 2 sacks. At the 9:21 mark in the first quarter, Joe, they had already accumulated 3 sacks. So that offensive line did not look good. The secondary had a dropped interception I just talked about, but quite honestly, we're flying all over the place. This team is going to have to be built on defense and running the football. DJU is not going to throw you out of any games. You're going to have to be ahead. You're going to have to lead and continue to lead and suffocate teams defensively. But what we got, we got something that was put on Twitter that was out of context. Okay, on Friday. Let me reiterate what I said last Friday to what we just saw on Saturday. He's the same exact guy. He's not progressing. There's nothing that I look at DJU, Joe, and say, all right, his footwork is better there. For example, the next team that we're going to talk about in Texas, you can look at a guy like Arch Manning and see constant growth. You see constant growth with quarterbacks when they're developing. I mean, for crying out loud, You literally saw it with the last two Heisman Trophy winners the year before and then the year that they won it, vastly improved. He's not improving. And I don't know if he wants to be real with you. I think that if it comes down to it, I think that Miami and Florida State are 1,000% the two most talented teams in that conference. I'm going to go with quarterback play. Joe, how long have you known me now? I always go with the best quarterback play. And Cam Ward will lead them to a victory, in my opinion, before DJU would. Florida State fans can be sensitive all they want to, but they got to look at the truth of what he is. He's not going to come in there and blow things out. And if he does against a really crappy ACC team, they'll be like, oh, hey, yeah. We're not comparing you right now to those crappy ACC teams. We're comparing you to the top tier teams of where you want to be. And if you think that he's going to throw you into wins, I'm sorry, he's not going to. Now, what you mentioned, Joe, that might be one of the fastest front sevens we've seen all spring.
Yeah.
Good God.
Yeah.
I mean, dude, I'll give Mike Norvell this. He has gotten to the transfer portal and done and evaluated very, very good, man. And they are fast. They are physical. God, that defense looked really good, though.
So to round out the thoughts on DJU, he hasn't improved since that freshman year at Clemson. And that's why I've always been very reluctant to buy in on any team that he's pushing their offense forward. Ironically, I don't know if you remember this, but you actually, in a couple of the times that like we were arguing over who would win in an Oregon State game when they were playing somebody in a premier matchup, you actually were much more positive on him a couple of times than I ever have been. And again, ironically, you're the one who got clipped, which is, it's funny that you're the shoes on the other foot. You get to finally feel what I deal with most of the time. But to kind of push forward there, Florida State fans, here's a positive note. You guys were able to win the ACC championship game last year with horrid quarterback play. You had two final games with two different quarterbacks with short weeks trying to get them prepared.
Better than that, by far.
I mean, even if he's as bad as Glenn and Rodemaker, even if he is, their defense dominated and their run game dominated in both of those games. And this is what the biggest positive that we noticed from this. Their defensive line's really good. Their defense is well-rounded and their run game's good. So there is a theoretical, actually not even theoretical. I still think that Florida State belongs in this conversation that they can win the conference because even when the quarterback play isn't good, which we saw last year, they have found ways to win. So if they beat Miami, say they play them twice next year, one in the ACC championship game and one during the regular season, they're going to have to beat them in a defensive battle and make them get into a duke out fight. You can't let Cam Ward beat you in a shootout. You will get cooked.
Yeah, I mean, him and Penix went after it last year. Joe, let me tell you one other thing about this. I thought their O-line play was not good at all.
Yeah, it was very shaky.
Very shaky. I worry about that with DJU. With Jordan Travis, you can get away with it. With DJU, you're not going to be able to. Sorry. No. So, as good as their defense is, I thought that in essence, offensively, they looked clunky. All right. And that's not gonna get you where you want to go. So you can say whatever you want about DJU. I thought he did not look that great. All right.
BetOnline remains your top spot for all of your live betting action and contests. NFL, college football, UFC, NHL are all in full swing. BetOnline is your number one source for wagering news, odds, trends, and predictions with both desktop and mobile access at any time. Head to BetOnline today and use promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for 50% off your first deposit. That is a 50% welcome bonus. BetOnline, where the game starts.